It was not more than just a few months ago that Roger Fette came into the museum to donate a plastic sign from the carpet carriage. Does anybody remember the carpet carriage? Now the sign is proudly displayed down in Heritage Hall. As Pat Chappie and I conversed with Roger in the lobby, he began to tell us the history of Fette Electronics. With our focus on Roger, we were amazed on the information that he told us. And just then, Pat and I realized that this would be a great program for tonight's event. With a little more convincing through emails, Roger and I, he finally said, "I'm in." I'll show you the text messages. Now, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Richard and Roger Fette to tell us the history of Fette Electronics.
My name is Richard Fette. My wife Joyce is sitting right next to her. Sure, it sure looks like a lot of people I know out in this audience, but I don't remember their names too well. In fact, I don't know if there's any of them. I know I don't. But that happens when you get old. It was 1992, and I was stationed at the Air Force Base, and I'd spent 5 years in service at the Air Force, and actually I was transferred from the Air Force to SAC, which is the bombing navigation unit, and I was mainly electronics repairman. And my time was up. It was time to quit. It was 5 years, and we had talked a lot about this, what we were going to do after I got out, and it was pretty much a shop. And where would we have that shop? Old Tana, but where Dad is from, got his shop going yet. And I didn't want to really compete with him. He was a pretty sharp guy. And though he taught me a lot of stuff, basically I figure I got my education, that we decided to move to Faribault. And the reason we wanted to move to Faribault, I had worked in a couple of small jobs here before, and I liked the people, I liked the town. It was a pretty great place, and that's why we decided. So we packed up our bags and stuff we were going to haul, and our 3 bundles of kids, which was Roger and David, and he's not here tonight. He had kept the shop open, and Doug, and Doug is he's a carpenter, and he had a job up in northern Minnesota building a place, and couldn't quite make it down here. So anyway, we moved to Faribault here, and after about 2-3 months, we had laid up the shop, figured where we're going to be. Joyce was working as my accountant, and I was working as the man that did all the work at first. And this is what got us started. And from this point on, I'm going to let Roger get in. And he's going to tell you. Thank you.
He might take the mic away from me after a little bit here, but so I'll start off the deal about coming and talking about Fette Electronics and the history. It's kind of like Brian said, and Brian said, you know, can you make it at least a 3 to 4 hour presentation? And I says, no problem. And then my mom said, well, that'll be no problem for you because you talk too much all the time anyway. So I decided to cut it back just to be merciful, and probably about an hour, Brian. Is that good? He's just laughing, he's not saying anything. So I did a lot of digging over the last couple months and have come up with a bunch of stuff. This is a business card that was my grandfather's card and my dad's dad. And it was in Meriden, Minnesota, and that's kind of where the story starts. Very interesting card. I'm pretty sure the date on this card is around 1930 or so. Just because of some other photos that'll come up here. So yeah, my grandfather operated this gas station in Meriden right on the main street. And if you read this card, it's pretty interesting. Crosley radio dealer, radio repair, oils, portable feed grinding, electric arc welding. I mean, you just got to do all that stuff in the early 30s to get by. So here's believe it or not, a picture of the feed mill. And so part of the story of this, as far as I can figure out from history, is, of course, most of the rural country was not electrified. There wasn't electric motors, there wasn't anything, and even buying the little single piston motors to grind feed and stuff was quite expensive. So he came up with the idea to mount this on the back of we're not sure if the vehicle would believe it's a Model A, and rigged it up to go around to the farms and grind their feed for them. The gas station sign, I actually have that. This is the gas station that was out of Meriden. Come down to the store and look at it. It's actually in really good shape. It's the right price for gas. Although if you notice, tax is still 33% there. So his shop, and the history kind of transitions through the 30s. There's a couple of stories that I don't really have photos or paper on, but the stories was he was transmitting a radio station, and part of what he was doing with the Crosley radios and stuff, the farmers would buy these radios, but nobody, when they'd read these Sears Roebuck magazines and they'd buy all these radios, they didn't understand what the word kit mean, K-I-T. So they'd see a picture of a radio, order it for $8.99 or whatever it was, which was quite a lot of money back then. And they would get a box of parts. And so that's, I believe, sort of how that story started, that he started building radios, repairing radios, and doing that type of stuff. Well, okay, so he's got the gas station, he's in town, he's got power. So what does he do? He says, well, in the out in the country, and all the farmers did not have power. Well, how do you run the radio? They also didn't know that you had to power this radio up to make it work. So he there's stories of the fact that he had had a battery exchange service at the gas station, and he would charge up 6-volt batteries during the week, and then they would come in to church Sunday mornings, go to the store at noon, and then go back to the farm, and they would exchange batteries. And then so the story goes that Herb says, well, what are they listening to? This is southern Minnesota, there's no radio stations. So Herb starts a radio broadcast, and he started doing the broadcasts during Sunday nights for a couple hours. They would fire up this transmitter, and they would have people come into the studio, and they would broadcast live music and talk about farming, I suppose, I don't know. And so this went on through the 30s, and in 1929 is when the FCC was formed, I believe, right around there. And so middle 30s, he went out to Washington, D.C. to try to get the transmitter license, because they were starting to enforce licensing and all this stuff. They turned him down because he was living in Meriden. He said, well, you need to be in a little bit bigger town. We don't know if we want to allocate this. So of course, in 1939, he moved to Otana and started a shop there. And this picture is in that shop in Otana. Another thing that he did in the late 30s or so is he had amplified services to do public address. And so he would set up battery-powered PAs in the fairgrounds and or at events and stuff. And so this is one of the cards here. Now there's an interesting story on this card. Let me see if I've got, I'm going to jump forward. Oh, there's another. Okay, so here's a picture of the movie theater in the 30s that he would take to towns. The vehicle has Fette Outdoor Movies on it. It's a trailer with a projector mounted into it. If you look at the car hooked to it, you can see there's a big screen that would tip up, and they would park this on Main Street on different nights of the week. The merchants would stay open, they would run the movies, and then that would be the night that everybody would come to town to go shopping. The merchants, being entrepreneurial, would always complain that they didn't like the one-off movies. They wanted serials, ones that they'd have to come back week to week to week. So they loved the 2- and 3-part movies. And so they always had to try to do those type of movies at these different sites. This is the Otana shop. And the sign above the door is actually down at our store. I'm trying to find the photo I want here. There's another car there. There's my grandpa and my 3 aunts. There's a Herb Fette, a small shop, and one that was over the door to the shop. Okay, here's the ones I want. These were slides that were ads that he did in Meriden. So when he would go around to the cities, different cities doing the movies, of course, he would put advertising in there first. So there's a number of very, very cool slides here. It says H.H. Fette, Meriden, Minnesota in there. Okay, there's the first sound truck. So that was sound truck number 1 that he was built. There's a Fette amplifier service, which is that FAS on that truck. If you go back, you can see it's up on the side there, Fette amplifying service. There's sound truck number 2, even bigger speakers. Now you had to make all your own stuff back then. They didn't really sell sound systems. I believe I've identified this as technically sound truck 3, although it probably is sort of a crossover. And then we get to sound truck 4, which is that station wagon with those speakers. Now if you look at those speakers, if anybody's paid attention the last 30 years on the Heritage Days parades, that's the speakers that are down there every year. We still use them. Pretty interesting. Probably nobody paid attention to that, but now you will. We've changed the drivers on them to modern drivers, but we still use those horns because we didn't want to carry around 6-volt batteries and stack them in people's yards to try to make them work. The original speakers and stuff, you had to carry around batteries to make the magnet, you had to carry around the amplifier to make the speaker work. So you had to constantly charge batteries to power up these magnets and to keep this working. There's a thermometer that was advertising for that garage. There's another radio bench. Now what'll be interesting, and there's some other slides I've got, I believe, TV and radio benches haven't changed. Our benches down there today look just exactly the same. A little bit newer equipment. Okay, so back to my dad. And I don't know if he knows I got this picture or not. If you see in the bottom it says Richard, with parentheses, Dickie. Apparently that was his nickname when he was a kid, so just remember that when you see him around town. If you also notice, and I think I have a photo after, I try to put these sort of in order, but this is more fun. He's holding the gas station hose there, so Grandpa's already got him slaving at however old he is there, I'm guessing 3, 4, 5. So he was a gas jockey at a very young age. Then he grew up, and there's his service photo from when he was in the SAC base. Now he kind of talked about that a little bit, but I'll go into a little more detail on the SAC base, because I've heard some of the stories through the years, and also what he was servicing was the B-47 supersonic bombers, super secret planes back in the 50s. They're the only bomber that was ever supersonic, speed capable also. In other words, faster than the speed of sound. What he maintained on those was basically he was maintaining the computer nav systems and all the navigation systems in these things. And you have to understand, computers in those days actually had little tiny pinochle tubes and very small parts in them. And they were very, very hard to maintain. Part of the reason he was kept in the service the extra year was he was probably the only guy in base that could fix them. He won't, I don't know if he'll admit to that, but I think that's why they kept him. It was right during the Cuban Missile Crisis and a bunch of stuff in '61. And he was supposed to get discharged, was canceled after during that time, and then he stayed in. So this painting is down at our store. Now I'm embellishing here, which is okay because I'm trying to have some fun here. This painting was painted by an artist that was out of Chicago that had moved to Meriden in the early 30s and was good friends with my grandpa, Herb Fette. There's actually a book written on this artist. We have this painting, particular painting, it hung in my grandpa and grandma's house in Pearl Street down in Otana as far as I can remember until she died. And then she had willed it to my dad. My thought, and this is embellishing, is I think that he got the idea for this painting from my dad from that gas station photo. Might be a stretch, you never know. But, so now we'll go back to this slide here. I guess I had that one out of order. So when you see this slide that has that artistry, I'm pretty sure, I'm trying to figure out, but if you look at the artistry on this, and this was probably middle 30s is when this one was made. It's still Meriden. Notice the crazy phone numbers. I believe that Stewart drew that card as his new card sometime in the 30s for Herb's shop down there. You know, so this was his card in the early 30s. And I think that Stewart said, you gotta have a fancier card, and this is where that artistry came from. No evidence of that, embellishing a little bit, but it sure seems like that makes sense. This sign I actually have up here. I actually found that the other day. I didn't even know that we had it, actually. This was on Pearl Street at their shop. I'm guessing this has to be about 52 or 53. Now, the young man under the sign was my oldest cousin, Randy Greger. So he was a cousin. Well, I was not born till '59, but he was my cousin. He was a Fette descendant that we had lost to cancer in the middle '80s. Obviously, my dad was the only boy of 4 girls. There was 5 in the family. Herb Fette and my grandmother. A little bit more recent photo, I'm guessing late 60s probably. They're all married. And we're kind of going forward here to, okay, this is not technically an old photo. My brother's cranes, they were putting up a grain bin for my other brother. But I want to talk about the late 60s, just a little bit about the other hobby that my father had, farming. He liked farming. Kind of got him away from the service bench and all the stress of trying to fix things. And so I believe it was about 1969 he bought a farm out in Walcott. Now if anybody's familiar with Walcott, I'm not sure that you can call that farmland. It's more like rock growing land. One of the things that happened when I was 9 or 10 years old is we would go out in the summer and weekends and have fun picking rocks. Yeah, well, that's what he said. He said, we're going to go have some fun. We're going to go pick rocks. So I'm going to I've taken a lot of photos. Here's some advertising from the 60s. About 1970, after my father got out of the Air Force Base, came up to 62 and started Fette Electronics. And in 67 bought the 205 building. and in '77 bought the 207 building, which are the two buildings we're in now. In about 1970 or 71, I think it was, we bought the Magnavox franchise from a business that was getting out of selling TVs. So some of this came from there. Magnavox research facilities, this is actually something that I found. It's a fairly large thing. It's hanging down their store. It was interesting to me because it showed 4,776,000 square feet of manufacturing in the U.S. These are some very early 80s or late 70s posters for products. Lots of radios. So let's go to this one right there. So that there, as far as we can absolutely determine, and I've been told, and it's probably very romantic, is my grandpa Herb Fette bought that for his wife for their wedding present, and then bought her an Atwater Kent radio to listen to the broadcast on Sunday. I think that's how that went, but it's pretty close. But that is the actual radio and speaker that they had when they got married. Interesting story about this TV in '69. This is a 50s Philco Predicta, and as you see me up here, I got this fancy little remote. You can do all the TV remotes, and you can do all that stuff today. That is a remote TV. Now it doesn't seem like it, but if you look at that big ribbon cable up there, you would set the picture tube out in front of you, lay that big, huge ribbon cable around the room, and put the box next to you, and you could turn the channels. That was a middle 50s remote TV. Now I'm not sure that decorating in the house would allow for that too much. I don't know how many of those were sold for that, but there's an interesting story on that. In '69, it was hooked up and running in our garage, and as a kid, I watched the Apollo 11 landing on the moon on that TV. So the other thing my dad did, and I'm not sure the exact story, but I believe that he got this guitar traded to him in about '58 or '59 for a TV repair, because when he was in the Air Force, he was doing TV repairs off base when he wasn't on base working. And so he'd fix TVs and make some money and stuff like that. And so he got this guitar, and I think Dave Miller has seen this guitar. I see Dave Miller back there. And he still has that guitar, but in the '60s, of course, he's in Faribault, and I'm not quite sure how the story goes, but in the photo was Dick Fette, Fritz Maschie, Mert Hoover, which was from the area, and I forget the drummer's name. The early drummer was Augie Jacob, and then this drummer was the replacement, I'm not sure. But this was a band, the Prairie Dutchman, that played around Faribault in the '60s. And so sometime after 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 kids, 10 kids or something, I think he had to stay home. Mother said, yeah, no more hanging out in the bars with Fritz Maschie, you guys. Now I don't know if that's true, but Mom's over there going, well, I think so. I might be in trouble after this too, but. So anyway, that's a picture of that. There's a little close-up of those guys. They were based out of Dundas because Mert Hoover lived out on Highway 3, and before Rice County had the landfill, the Hoover farm was the landfill. That was when they would bury private property landfill, and so that land is still out there, and that house is still out there. This is a radio license from Herb's shop. Here's a thing, I guess that's got my name on it, from like '78 or '79, Magnavox training. Now that's high tech, because this says solid state on it, doesn't say tubes. But that was middle '70s to late '70s deal to repair televisions. Some of the other things that and I know for sure, I wasn't able to get all the photos, but like, this is an amplifier that was repaired probably in the '50s at my grandfather's shop. Anybody remember Admiral? Admiral was a big name in TVs back then. A little bit more modern Magnavox sign. some pictures of some test equipment, some in-table radios, some shots down our store of, yeah, I'm not sure, we've kept a lot of radios. I would even classify us as hoarders of radios. Very much hoarders. Although I think we're okay. I don't think anybody's gonna make us throw them out yet. And just mind you, these photos are only probably 30% of what we actually have, because it's the only we're running out of shelves. That's a car radio from the 30s and early 40s, and it's actually two pieces. You had to have both these pieces installed. You see these big cables, and then they would hook to the battery box. It's a Majestic audio radio, and that, you can see the dial up there, so that mounted under your dash, and you turn knobs, and all these boxes were back in your trunk or something to make that work. Now, growing up with the old cool stuff, there's a few things that I did that at first I thought it was kind of crazy. If anybody remember the junior high auditorium, the big auditorium that was tore down, and those are the speakers from that auditorium from 1933. Another shot of the magnet and the amplifier. So when those guys were tearing that thing down with the cranes, I went over and gave them 20 bucks and said I wanted them out. So they ripped the roof off, pulled them out, and I took them. It would seem kind of crazy back then, but I'm really glad I did it now. I'm sure Brian wants it down at the Historical Society now that he knows that I have it. And I'm sure they could put a big picture of the junior high. And I know for sure I've seen some photos of the big facade. If you remember, everybody remembers the big fabric facade that was up in the dead center up above. That's where this stuff was all hanging. And when I was in junior high, I was the one running it because I was the only one that could keep it working. This is some speakers and some old TVs that we've got down there, more test equipment. These little stereos, we sold a ton of those in the early 70s, Magnavox stereos. We also sold, so there's some more test equipment from benches. Most of these either came off of our benches or my grandpa's benches. There's a few that I found at swap meets and stuff and bought, but most of them have somehow kind of came from our benches at one time or another. Of course, we don't use them anymore because stuff's gotten a little more modern. There's another stereo. One of two arrows that I got given back to me from Tree Frog. So Fette Electronics sponsored for 15 years Tree Frog. And so Brushworks had done the signs, and when they decided to get out of the business a few years ago, they must have had that stashed somewhere. So I came back to the shop one day and there it was. I suppose Brian is looking at me going, yeah. One of the things we sold in the 70s, and it was when I was in high school, and we sold a lot of stereos. And Marantz was one of the brands we had gotten after the Magnavox line. So some of that we've either gotten back, or we've acquired. Me and my brother actually have a fairly massive collection of the vintage 70s Marantz stuff. It's a little scary, it's hoarding again. There's an Atwater Kent radio that would probably be late 30s, early 40s. There's a Philco radio from the 30s, another Philco from the 30s, another Philco from the 30s. Almost all the wood style. This is a little bit newer one, but I took a picture because it's actually Admiral brand. I'm guessing that's probably late 40s because it's the plastic case. There's an Rca Victor, and it's just a little radio, but that's how the speaker bezel was on that. And some more test equipment, little tiny TV combos with the clock, TV, AM, FM radio, everything in there. There's another little Philco. That's actually a Radiocordia, and it records on a plate on the top. It was pretty interesting. I think we got that given to us. People seem to like to give us all their old radios. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but it seems to be a lot of fun now. Tape-a-thon recorders with the original reels, Coronado. Everybody remembers all these brands because that's what's been sold forever. This is an interesting one. We sold that in Spirit of 76. There's a lot of red, white, and blue type products produced. So on the top's a little AM radio. That was the Magnavox space capsule, and it was a special red, white, and blue version because it was kind of the shape of the Apollo capsule, and it was the 3 colors. There's an old Victor record player. Actually, if I pick back, there's actually that painting in the back. Come down and see it, you guys. The painting is really cool. It's another Zenith transoceanic type. So here's some stationery that was from the Fette garage. A couple of different types, both the Meriden and the Otana locations. Another thing that the 70s was really big for was, you know, the 70s was sort of the golden era of TV radio shops and sales shops before the big box stores and before online and all that type of stuff. In 77, we had done a private sale, and you gotta remember this is before computers. I can remember stuffing envelopes for hours. I thought it was days. And Mother would say, no, keep stuffing those envelopes. And they would do these mailings to these private sales, and we'd send out a ticket, and everybody would come to this private sale. Well, we had done a private sale in 77, and my dad won an award from Magnavox for the largest private sale in the U.S. below a certain size city. Just to buy truckloads of TVs and bring them in, and we'd sell them. There's some advertising that we had done, different stereos. My brother up doing the service on top. Check the computer out on the left. Those, I'm sure you guys want that style again. There's Kim doing alarms. If you look at the keypad, it's really old. This was back when they kind of set up some alarm, you know, I called it snake oil salesmen selling alarm systems, and they really didn't work, and they would trip, and the police would waste all the time with the things. So the city back during this time passed some ordinance to kind of clean that up. This was a 30-year article. I think this has to be 10 years ago when we were Chamber Business of the Year. There's a before we started redoing the buildings, and this was probably 20 plus years ago. There's the after where we cleaned up all the paint, cleaned up all the bottom, made everything match again. There's about a 1972 photo of Crazy Days. On the left was Jewel Larson. He was a person that had serviced TVs for my dad for many, many, many years. The guy in the wig is still on Facebook quite a bit, Marv Bodke. Anybody remember Marv Bodke? Yeah, that's him. So when you see him, you've seen him in a wig and in a clown costume. So he had worked for my dad through the 70s, and my mom and dad are there. I'm not sure who's peeking around the corner. It's got to be, I don't know. There's somebody else sitting down there. I don't think it's one of us because it's too big. This was in 72, so I was only 13. Here's the big box TVs that y'all wish you had again. A couple of shots of the radios. And so, yes, I confess, everybody hearing those cars going down the street going boom, 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 that's our fault. We sold them all that stuff. VCRs, everybody misses VHS tapes. This has to be about 1978 or 79. I don't remember what the name of the guy on the left was. I believe he was from the newspaper. The guy on the right is me with an afro. Pretty scary. The 70s were the heyday of like high-end stereo and stuff. So this was a room that we had upstairs And there's a picture of, you know, all new Marantz receivers, Jensen speakers, Marantz speakers, all kinds of stuff. And we sold a lot of stereo in those days because that was the big thing. If you look along there, there's all the turntables, reel-to-reels. Some more old shots of the big TVs. And then the early 80s, and I kind of just went, oh no. I knew what this meant. So we started installing C-band dish systems. So this particular dish was a demo disc. It was mounted on a trailer, and we would park it at somebody's house so they could try out C-band dishes for a week and decide if they wanted to pay to have one put in. Some more TVs. 79 or 80 was Odyssey, so we had piles of Odysseys, piles of games in the secured. So the 8-track display became the Odyssey game display because 8-tracks are gone, but we could use it to keep, you know, theft prevention on the Odyssey games because they were expensive back then. At one time, we had a dish in the front window of our store, and it was actually pointing up past the buildings and working. And nobody believed we could get it to work, but we did. Well, my dad did. There's my brother Dave working on a service bench a few years ago. There's Jewel working on some tube sets, and if you look at these tube sets, Jewel was always famous for getting his finger too close to that little box on the right there. That little metal box. That was called the high voltage box, where the transformer for the high voltage picture tube connection was made. And so every once in a while, we'd hear a yelp out of the back room, and he'd got his hand too close to that thing, and he'd get zapped, and you'd hear him yelping back there a little bit, and we'd go, Jewel, don't put your hand in there. There's one of those semi-loads of the shows that he bought out. Sherman were unloading out in front on Central Avenue, hauling all the stuff into the shop. There was the big Weingart fiberglass dishes we had installed. There's some more modern computers. So when you look at technologies that's changed, one of the things my dad did that nobody did in 81, 82 is he got sick of selling TVs and stereos. He wanted to sell computers. So he was the first one in town that started building DOS 3.0 computers and selling them. And he's actually still just about building computers now. So we've tried to always learn new technologies and get into it and build this stuff. Remember the big VHS camcorders? Big shoulder, almost like a boombox, only they were a video camera. That stuff's all changed towards these, you know, micro circuit boards. Some of the technologies we're in now is we're doing a huge amount of IP video and security and stuff. So we build and sell the servers. A little branch, which is not officially Fette Electronics, but it's really kind of all tied together. And I think it's in my blood because of my grandpa running around with those cool sound trucks. I have a company called Fette Productions, and so we do pretty good sized shows. These amplifiers here, you know, there's 100,000 watts of audios in the 2-rack. There's a show. This is a shot of actually down in Rochester with, I'm not sure which band it was, but we're covering the park down there, and there's around 15 to 20,000 people hearing this concert. The other thing we do is the installs, high-tech installs, upgrading systems. This is some stuff that was installed over in St. Olaf College. Here's a fairly large server array for video for security. I won't say where that's installed, but it's we basically store almost 45 cameras a full year of HD video for security purposes on this install. So that's where we've gone. We've swung into doing all this high-tech technologies. There's another shot of that one. This is the back shot of some servers and some designs we had done at Concordia Academy up in North St. Paul. Friends of mine know me, so they had me design and install that. We got about 60 cameras up there in that school. Here's a little bit of some shots of the big sound systems and the larger amp systems and stuff. Some of the shows that I do We do lighting, sound, video. Rock and Roll Revival, most people kind of know that over in Northfield. It's an every other year thing that happens at the high school. Phenomenal show. The next one is next year already. I've been doing that show for 25 years, every other year, so it's kind of a little scary actually, but so that there, I've got some stories about this. This is the 57 Merc that, my understanding is they bought it used when they were in Arkansas in about 58. Is that right? You bought it in Otana, but yeah, but you drove it back down to the Sac base and then drove it back up here. Okay, so he still has that car. This was a few years ago at a car show down at TV Tonka Park. And I can tell you in the 60s when we'd go to Grandma's house for Christmas and back to Otana, I know that, yeah, Mr. Cook's back there, but he can't arrest me anymore, but we didn't do 55. Well, we're gonna go to Grandma's house for Christmas, and that car would fly. So I remember that car before I even have memories of being very young in that car. And he's restored it and he takes it around now. He doesn't let any of us drive it. I don't know why. But the history of Fette Electronics goes way back. Somehow it must be in our blood because we're just always into new technologies. We like old cars, we like old stuff, but we're into the new stuff. The technologies we're using now in the store for both repair. If you would ask us if we'd still be repairing TVs today, 20 years ago, if you would have asked me that, I would say, no way. If you come into our store now, there's 30 flat screens lined up. It's not a total throwaway society yet, but there's not very many shops like us doing service anymore either. So we are still repairing these big flat screens and stuff. You know, some of those sets even now are $1,000. Well, the fact that you can actually get parts and fix them, you can usually fix them for $100, $200. So we're still doing service and stuff that I don't think thought we would still be working on now. The computer systems and stuff that I'm building now, I'm supplying these very customized server type things. Those, I think, we're in a kind of a unique situation. We're not the IT software absolute guru specialists over here, and we're not the mechanics over here. We're kind of in the middle. We're the ones that sort of come up with the solutions to tie the two together. You know, we do a lot of stuff both for the city and for fairly large companies. We're tying together their access control to their burg, to their fire, to their video, integrating all this type of stuff. So it's something that must be in our blood pretty thick, that we just keep interested in this, keep expanding. We're still putting up TV antennas because people are saying, you know what, $100, $200 a month for cable or dish, you know what, we're just gonna watch the off-air for free from the cities. So if you would have asked me 20 years ago if we were gonna be putting up antennas now, I'd say, I don't think so. I don't think we'll be doing antennas. Well, last week they put up another 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. I think, what's the list now, Kim, like 15 people waiting?
Yeah, 3 weeks.
2 to 3 to 4 weeks. We can't even keep up putting those in. Obviously we don't go out when it's windy or raining, but you know, so we're still doing technologies like that. You know, over on the technology side of what I do for the production and stuff, used to be massive amounts of cables. We're using fiber optics, you know. 2,000 pounds of cable was replaced with a 25-pound piece of fiber optic fiberglass. You know, sort of the data transmission rates. The Northfield Historical Administrator over there, I was glad to see her there. Well, she's looking at something now. But she knows me quite well, because I take care of the Jesse James days all over the city. We're hanging stuff up on the roofs, we're hanging stuff on scaffolding. One of their Jesse James director gals said, she wanted a list of what I did, so I gave her a list and she looked at me and says, are you crazy? How do you get from here to there? You know, the technology has allowed us, the stuff is so much smaller and so much better now, you know. I love the old radios, don't get me wrong, but some of these new stereos and some of this new equipment we're using and all these different technologies, both on my rental side and in the store side, just amazing. You know, so it's just been a very interesting ride. I can't tell you where it's going to be 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, because the technology is accelerating so fast. Recent things on the news to me were just amazing. Now, you know, whether you like them or not, the announcement that we're going to be back on the moon in about 3.5 years. Why we haven't done more research like that, I realize it's expensive, but it's all pretty amazing. The thing is if you think about the Apollo 11 in 1969, your cell phone, even a basic cell phone, even the basic cell phone you have, somewhere around 10,000 times more powerful than the computers they used to get to the moon back in '69. And so the size of those chips getting smaller and the technology and how much more precise it is. So it's just an amazing evolution of all this stuff. I know Dave can attest to it, to the, you know, being in the music side of it with, you know, he had a huge history with Eastman's and now he's got his own spot over there by the A&W root beer stand with selling guitars and music and supplies and doing all what he does, but I'm sure he's got the same thing. You know, it's one of those things that's just absolutely amazing. And I guess we have to owe it, you know, to my dad there, my grandpa. Ingenuity of, somehow it's in our family and in our bloodstream that we just do this. I don't regret a minute of it, and I just totally do it more and more. What do you think, Brian? I don't have a lot more to add. Anybody got any questions? I'd love to see if anybody's got any questions about what we've done. If not...
I have a question about next generation.
Well, I didn't have any kids. No idea why, other than I just didn't. We have a next generation working in the store, and there's about 8 years ago, I, my brother Dave, and my sister Kim here bought the store officially from our parents. So we're in the second generation. We have a third generation working there. I don't know if anybody else will come into it. I don't. The business is changing so dramatically in 3 years. You know, who knows? I would say 5% of our business is out the front door retail, whereas in the 70s it was probably 80% out the front door retail and 20% service. It's flipped. All of the income and all the technology that we're doing is where we're supporting and installing and doing that type of work. So the retail side of it's really not a big part to us. We actually sell quite a bit out the front door, but you know, the retail trends of starting in the middle to late 80s, you know, like that sign I showed of the manufacturing facilities. When I went to engineering school at Magnavox in '78, there was close to 50,000 people working in that space. Towards the end of the 70s and early 80s, because of different changes, by '82 there was 4,000 people working at Magnavox. So in 4 years it went to almost nothing. Basically it was just the import stuff and retail sell it product line. And that was all companies. The late 70s, early 80s is when that big change happened. Where it's going to go from here, I don't know. You know, there's a lot of online sales. You know, what I always tell people is online sales and big box store sales don't promote local car shows. But the trends are there. You can't fight the trends of what consumers want. You know, you can buy wherever you want, you can do whatever you want, you can buy whatever car you want. So where we're going to be, I think we'll be around for a while yet. I've been told I can't retire. So we have a lot of companies I do a lot of major service for, and they're all looking at, well, when are you going to retire? I'm like, yeah, like 25 years, well, you're fine. you know. My dad hasn't retired. He's still down every day fixing stuff. Some people have found out he fixes up the old tube. Oh, I better not say anything. He's been restoring some old tube radios. We ended up with all of my grandpa's inventories. You know, 40 years plus of inventory. Because from 39 to 79, when my grandfather passed away, he had that radio shop in Otana. So we ended up with all that stuff. And all the other stuff we got. And all of our stuff that was acquired in the 60s and 70s. So we got a lot of old stuff too. If anybody wants to buy an old antique radio, stop her down. Thank you.